Hello everybody. I come to you on a tragic day indeed. Yesterday, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. The country has suffered a true loss. But the world must go on, and I have to get this video out. So in my last video, I hinted that I was making a project that would pair nicely with my silk bodice, and that project is going to be this black wool skirt. I've had only one skirt for the last year, and I decided that it was time to make another one. I really don't like making skirts all that much. I'm much better at tailoring than I am at draping, but I needed to get it done, so I did. So I'm going to take you along on the ride with me, and as per last time, there's not going to be a grand reveal at the end of this one. You're going to see the grand reveal a little bit later. I do have the video camera now, finally. I'm still trying to figure out how to transfer the videos from the camera to the computer. That's taking a little bit of time and puzzling on my part. But I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope that you stick around. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Time has come for a new skirt, because I have had only one skirt for the last year, and as much as I love it, I need another one. So I'm using the same pattern. It's the Truly Victorian TV296 1896 ripple skirt, and I made a few changes to it because last time I made some mistakes when formulating the pattern. So this time I corrected those. Last time I lengthened it by 3 inches. That wasn't quite enough. So this time I lengthened it by 5 inches. And I was planning on actually lengthening it by 7 inches, but then I realized that I wouldn't have enough fabric, so I should actually backtrack a little bit. I've got this black wool, so what I'm going to do is make a black skirt and a matching black bodice, and they'll be suitable for morning wear, but I'm going to decorate the bodice with some pink so I can wear it when I'm not in morning. So I'm going to cut out this skirt, and I will get back to you. I've gotten these skirt panels cut out, the 2 big ones. These are the side back pieces. Now, because I lengthened it, I had to piece just this tiny little bit at the hem, which really, really annoyed me, but I hadn't any choice. Also, irritatingly, I would have liked to have cut this edge along the selvage, but I couldn't because the selvage on this wool was kind of puckered, and I was afraid that it would lead to a weird result, so I had to cut the selvage off. Now, luckily, the lining, this was a 54-inch width of fabric. The lining fabric I bought, which is this black twill here, is 60 inches wide, so I won't need to piece the lining, or as it was spelled in the 16th century, lining. So I'm just going to stitch that little piecing bit on and press it flat, and that'll be great. And then I think I'm going to cut out the other skirt panels. Those won't take nearly as long, they're much smaller. It's so nice to not have to make a mock-up, since I've done this skirt before. Admittedly, I did make a few changes, but not enough changes to warrant a mock-up, I thought. So it's fun not to do mock-ups. It goes so much more quickly. So yeah, I'm going to stitch those little bits of piecing on, and then I'll get back to you. Alright, I'm cutting out the front and the side back panel. I've forgotten how much material there was in this skirt. I mean, look, I've gotten the 2 big panels pinned on, and they almost completely wrap around the sides and the back of the waist. The back of this is supposed to be cut on the fold, and then it's supposed to have a, come over to Maria. I've got all of the skirt pieces pinned onto her so they can stretch out if they need to before I put them on their linings and all that jazz. So the back is supposed to have like a big box plate, and then it's supposed to actually open here. That's what my gray skirt does. But I don't like that particularly. I want to have it be opening center back. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this not on the fold. I'm just going to cut that there, and I'm going to add a 1/2 inch so there's room for seam allowance. And then I'm going to have it be opening in the back, center back, and then just have pleats on either side. I think I'll like that better. In fact, I know I will. So that's what I'm going to do now. I am currently basting the flat lining to the outer wool. Focus. There we go. Now it's focused. You can see the other ones over here. I always feel very, very indignant about this part of the process. Like, I cut them out, now I gotta put them together too. I always feel like I'm being cheated somehow. But I'm almost done. This is the last piece, and then I can get on with things, which is very exciting because I don't have a table or any kind of flat surface that's large enough to accommodate this other than the floor. So I have been just sitting on the floor, basting all of these things together, and my knees have never hurt more than they have over these last few days. So that's going to be nice to move on from this step. Exciting news! This is going to be the last video that I film on my phone or on my iPad because I have ordered a video camera. Yay, yay! Hurrah, hurrah! So expect well, if the camera works and is of good quality, then expect a significant elevation in sound and video quality, and some interesting and exciting new angles. So yeah, I'm gonna finish basting this together. Then I'm gonna pin the panels together and stitch them up. And then we'll kind of be almost done. Then all I need to do is the waistband and put in the pleats. Of course, the hem is going to take a lot of time to do. It's about 6.5 yards around the hem, so I can sew on the bottom of the hem facing by hand, or by machine, but then I've got to sew on the hem stiffener by hand. So that's going to be 6.5 yards around the hem, on the bottom, 6.5 around the top. Then I've got to sew on the top of the hem facing by hand. Then I've got to sew on the hem braid by hand. And I also have a plan devised to make some brush braid. So I'm going to have to sew that on by hand. So all told, I'm going to have to sew about 40 yards by hand around the hem. So it's going to take me a long time to do the hem. But at least that will be, I can kind of, I don't have to be sprawled out on the floor doing that, so I can kind of just work on that as I go. I have no idea what I meant to say here. So, yes, wish my knees luck and send them get well soon cards. Bye-bye. We have now jumped through time. I've sewn in the placket. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. I definitely struggled with it. It's better than the placket in my gray skirt, but it's still far from perfect, but it's good enough, I think. So now I'm going to press the seams flat. What's this? I think I need to change my sewing needle. It's a little bit dull. I'm going to press the seams all flat, and then I'm going to put on the waistband. Now with my gray skirt, I just cut the waistband out of the same wool, but I've learned my lesson about doing that because it's stretched pretty significantly. So I think what I'm going to do for this is, where is it? So I think what I'm going to do for this, focus, is make the waistband out of this grosgrain ribbon. It's not inaccurate to use ribbons as waistbands. In fact, a lot of late 19th century skirts do that to kind of cut down on bulk. And as I'm sure you know, it will not stretch. So I think I'm just going to use this as the waistband. That means I need to figure out the pleating situation though. And actually figure out what measurement I want to make this to, because I used to wear my corset all the way laced up, which would give me a 25-inch waist, but this summer I've started leaving it open about an inch at the back because it's just been so hot. It was just kind of agonizing to have it all the way laced up so it didn't have any kind of like wiggle room. So just leaving it open that like inch or half inch at the back really, really helped. So it wasn't necessarily a question of having it be too tight. It was a question of having it just not have really any flexibility. So that has been so comfortable. I'm very tempted to just kind of keep on wearing my corset like that, even though it was fine all the way laced up in the winter. So I'm kind of thinking I should make this waistband half an inch bigger than I normally would. And that might actually be really useful as well because my dress form, Maria, her waist measurement is actually half an inch larger than my waist measurement. So if I increase my waist measurement by half an inch, that would make me fit her. So I think I might do that. It feels like weakness to say it, but I think I might have to do that because I want to be able to wear the skirt in the summer as well. And often, I mean, the thing is, like with my gray skirt, I can still, even though the waistband is stretched out, I can still lace my corset all the way closed and have, still wear the skirt. So I think if I make this waistband slightly to the larger size, and then I want to lace my corset all the way up, I can still wear the skirt if it's slightly too big. Whereas if it's slightly on the smaller side and I want to loosen my corset, I can't necessarily do that. Can't necessarily do that. So I think I'm gonna actually have this be made half an inch or 3/4 of an inch larger than I normally would. That's very long-winded, but that's what I'm gonna do. Since last checking in, I have put on the waistband. I tried to use that ribbon, it just kind of fell apart. So I just used some of the lining fabric and doubled it up so there's just 2 layers of the lining fabric making the waistband. And that's working just fine. I still need to put in some more closures here to keep the placket from gaping open. It is a very, very thick back here. It is intensely thick, but that's accurate. I mean, some of their clothes were incredibly thick. I'm not entirely satisfied. I'm trying to stand out of the way so I don't block the light. I'm not entirely satisfied with the pleating arrangement back there, since having this part be at the very kind of bottom, it kind of leads to it being forced under there. So it's not quite as full at the bottom in the center back as I might like. But because that is how it opens, I couldn't really have that part be on top of all of the pleats because that would just look incredibly stupid. I also feel like it probably would have looked better with maybe a few more pleats. So it's not completely perfect, but it's good enough. I mean, it's not upsetting enough for me to have to, or upsetting. It's not upsetting enough for me to have to like unpick it or anything. So it's fine. I've also put on the tapes that control the volume inside. There's some tapes on either side that kind of are just in here, and then I got them tied in the back. And that does wonders to make the back of the skirt just look a lot more full and kind of like brings the fullness to the back. I thought that they were optional for some reason the first time I made this skirt, so I don't have them in my gray skirt, which is definitely a mistake, and when I remake that skirt, I will definitely put them in. Lastly, I have pinned up the hem. So it is 3.5 inches off the ground in the back, 5 inches off the ground in the front, and then around 4 inches off the ground on the sides. My plan is to sew on a hem facing around the bottom, and then sew in the stiffening. Now, I got this for stiffening. This is called horsehair braid. It's made out of nylon. I know nylon is not authentic. It's not historically accurate. I could not find any of the stuff that was made out of actual horsehair, so I know this is not period correct, so don't at me, whatever that means. So I've got enough of it to do like a double layer of it around the hem. So what I'm gonna do is sew on the hem facing, which is made out of a very stiff twill, around the bottom, then sew the horsehair braid onto the inside by hand, and then I'm going to lift up the hem facing and sew that on by hand again at the top over the horsehair braid, so it just covers that up. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to configure it so I can get the hem facing sewn directly onto the bottom. I'm also thinking that maybe I'll just kind of do up this hem by machine and then put on the hem facing underneath by machine, because that very bottom part is going to be covered up by a hem braid anyway. Again, this is not from Burtley and Trowbridge. This is just some cotton braid that I found at Mill End. It was significantly less expensive than the stuff from Burtley and Trowbridge, and I like the idea of just having it. So I know, I feel guilty, but I did not have a ton of money. I did not have a ton of money, as if I have a ton of money now. I just don't have a ton of money. So I had to go with the more economical option. I still need to, of course, cut out the hem facing and all of that, so I'll bring you guys along for that too. I'll probably need to buy more pins before I do that, because all of them are taken up in the hem of the skirt, and I don't want to unpin it. I should have cut out the hem facing before I pinned the hem of the skirt up. But oh well. I made a facing, it's around 8 inches wide, just from the bottoms of the patterns, and sewed them all together, so now there is one incredibly long facing piece. This almost seems like it's way too long, but I'm pretty sure it is not. It's supposed to be 6.5 to 7 yards, so that actually, yeah, that pans out. But there's a lot of facing. No, it's clearly not a circle yet because I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to stitch it into a circle yet, just in case it isn't quite the right size. So I'm going to sew it on and then just finish it off when I get closer to it. So what I did was I just kind of stitched the hem up like this because the pins had a really awful tendency of catching in this wool and creating pulls, so I just had to get them out of there. So I just ran a stitch on the sewing machine around the hem of the skirt. I'm going to cut this down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is iron the both edges of the facing inwards, and then I'm just going to top stitch the bottom of the facing onto the hem of the skirt just by machine, because that part's going to be covered with a hem braid later on, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like. And then I'm going to hand stitch the hem stiffener in, and then I'm going to hand stitch this top part on over the hem stiffener. So that's my current plan. Wish me luck. I have sewn the facing, or not the facing, the stiffener onto the little seam allowance of the facing, just very sloppily with a back stitch by hand. And I've also overcast, I'm not sure if you can really see these, I've overcast the seam allowances down to the lining. It was quite difficult because I had every stitch I had to pull down on the outer fabric to make sure that I wasn't catching it. So it took a long time. This transition was about half a second for you, but for me it's been about 2 weeks of stitching on the stiffener and stitching this stuff down. But it's finally done. So now what I need to do is bring the facing and fold it up over the stiffener like that, and then stitch it down to just cover the stiffener. However, I've hit a snag. When I measured for the size of the facing, or for the size of the facing, I only measured one piece of stiffener since they're supposed to be the same size, so I measured this shorter one. However, there's also this longer one. So although I thought I was giving myself some wiggle room, this one is 6 inches wide, and I cut the facing out to be 8 inches wide. It's not wide enough. I don't have enough to fold under. So I'm going to need to cut some strips of the normal lining and sew them together, and then sew this strip, it's only going to need to be like an inch. But I'm going to need to sew that strip to the top of the facing so that it can be long enough to be folded under. So that's really, really frustrating, but there's not really a way around it. Oh, also a word on the facing. It was advertised, the thing said that it was 100% cotton. I did a burn test on it. It certainly has cotton in it. However, it's very much of a stretch to say that it's 100% cotton. In fact, I'd say that that's more than a stretch. It's in fact untrue. I definitely got some synthetic in it, but by the time I figured that out, it was too late. It would have been wasteful and decadent to buy a whole other facing just because this one didn't have quite the right fiber content. So I just went with it. But I'm going to cut out the strips and sew them together and then sew them onto this. It's just going to be very, very quick and sloppy on the machine, sewn on, and then I'm going to fold it over and stitch it down by hand. That's also going to take a long time because, again, I'm going to need to make sure that I'm not catching any of the... And at this point I got rather impatient and stopped filming any more of the making process, but I cut out a strip, sewed it onto the top of the facing, and then sewed the facing down to the lining of the skirt, and then I sewed on the hem braid, and that was it. And the skirt is now done. I'm wearing it right now. This is the bodice that I made out of the same material. I didn't film the process because it was exactly the same process as the silk bodice I did, except I changed the sleeves. It's maybe not the best material to make a bodice out of because it's quite thick wool and the cuffs came out being rather bulky, but I love it nonetheless. So you're not going to see any more of the making of the bodice, but just wait for a little bit longer and you'll see the grand reveal of both the bodice and the skirt at the same time. And it is now safe to go outdoors in Oregon and breathe the air again. It wasn't for the last week and a half. So I'm very, very grateful about that. And I will film the grand reveal outdoors. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you'll stick around. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye-bye.